But without any further ado, we'll get started this morning. Again, I'm Amber. I'm a board member on the Greater Rochester Quality Council, which is an affiliate of the Greater Rochester Chamber of Commerce. I'm delighted to invite you all and welcome you all as this is our record-setting Performance Excellence Forum event. We have over 200 folks that registered for this event. We're so excited that you're all here to learn more. I'd also like to give a special welcome to those who are attending from the Performance Excellence Network in Penn, a new partner and friend of Greater Rochester Quality Council. So today's session is going to be recorded, and the recording is going to be posted on our website for your access later. So if you're like me and you like to take notes and have access to slides, please rest assured, know that that's going to be available for you. Additionally, closed captioning is available for you today, and that'll be on your device. Just click on the CC icon on your screen. And then out of respect for everyone's time, we are asking all participants to be on mute. But what we love to see is that action in the chat. Keep letting that up. Keep adding comments and questions throughout today's session. Myself and my fellow peers from the Quality Council Board will be monitoring the chat, and we'll interject on our lovely speakers today and ask your questions as they flow with their presentation. And I'd just love to share, just again, why are we all here, right? We're here because we are passionate about quality, we are passionate about our community, and Greater Rochester Quality Council helps area organizations achieve that sustained performance excellence by helping leaders and teams learn how to adopt best practices and improvement processes and an organization culture. We offer a broad range of easy-to-access services to meet the needs of all organizations, regardless of size, sector, or experience, with continuous improvement. And that's really how today's program idea came to be. One of the free services that we offer is called Day of Quality. Day of Quality is modeled after United Way of Greater Rochester and the Finger Lakes' Day of Caring program. And our Day of Quality has local quality experts spending an entire day working alongside of our fearless nonprofit staff and small businesses on any process problem projects. Over the years, we've found that on that day of quality, folks are really curious about process mapping, and they find such value in the technique itself. And so we wanted to spotlight it today, give you a little bit of an introduction to how to use the tool when it's appropriate, so that on your actual day of quality, you can dive right in. So we are getting ready for Day of Quality. Applications are now open. So if you're interested in volunteering or signing up your organization, you can do so right away. We'll make sure that link is in the chat. But as you listen to our Performance Excellence Forum speakers today, I hope that you listen from that lens. If you're an old pro at at process mapping, so many P's, y'all. If you're an old pro at process mapping, we encourage you to listen from the lens of, could I do this? Could I facilitate an organization that I don't know about their service line through the process of process mapping? And if so, what are the tips that the speakers share that you might want to not note down for yourself so that you can apply those when you so graciously volunteer to help out a nonprofit? Or if you're one of our nonprofit peers, I see we've got Willow in the chat and FoodLink and more folks from Willow. We encourage you, think about process mapping, right, in your organization. What are those sticky process problems that you could see applying this for? And then we would just note there's obviously an apparent hunger for process mapping and more information, pun intended. So I'm going to move towards introducing our guest speakers so that they can really take up our time because they are prepared to satiate your appetites. So first, I'd like to welcome Jason Becker on our call. Jason is a Lean Six Sigma Caped Crusader from L3 Harris. And he has been battling process inefficiencies for over a decade. Before joining L3 Harris, Jason worked with several leading area companies, including Corning, Gleason Works, and Constellation Energy. And Jason is a Lean Six Sigma expert and black belt. Accompanying him today is Lucas Dodge, his fearless co-facilitator, also a process engineer with ESL Federal Credit Union. And before joining ESL, Lucas worked with L3 Harris for over 11 years in various different functions. I also want to extend our gratitude to both Jason and Lucas for their service. Jason served in the U.S. Navy and Lucas served in the Marine Corps. These two are dynamite community stewards. They have both volunteered for Day of Quality in the past, working with different teams and nonprofits to improve critical work processes. So we thank you, we appreciate you, we welcome all of our guests, and the floor is now yours. Jason and Lucas, take it away.
Excellent. Thank you, Amber. I appreciate the introduction. And thank you, everybody, for taking time out of your day to join us, where we'll talk about process mapping. And hopefully at the end of this, you too will be empowered to be a process mapping superhero and help those nonprofits on Day of Quality. So here's the topics we're going to cover today. We're going to have a few polls with some questions, get to know each other, get to know about each other. And we'll cover the history, and we'll talk about some pizza. So, you know, and maybe at the end, we'll talk about what's next. Next. All right. Normally at this point, you'd be asked to silence your cell phones, but at this time, we need you to have your cell phones. Jason, in a few seconds, is going to be pulling up. Here we go. We have the Slido. So if you would use the QR code, you can scan that, enter that code into slido.com when it opens up, and you will be able to do the polling. It will start on Jason's cue. So Jason?
So it's one of those things, if you got your camera on, everybody should be their phone right in front of their camera. That way we know it's working well. First question we've got today is, which city are you in today? Which city? Go ahead and you should see the poll opening. I've got some people already entering them in there. Going along good. As you can see, the results are coming in. It's always good to see how wide the span of our people that are going to be on the Zoom call. It also helps you understand the community that you're in. And how far away. Like, how far away does GRQC reach? Bolivar, oh my gosh, Arlington, we're moving way out there. San Francisco, this is great. I'm trying to think of all the places I've been to, and it's not all of those. Cool. Well, thanks for joining us. As you can actually see, project management and the things that we're going to talk about today for process mapping are all in there, and they're definitely global things that we have there. It's really good to see the interest where we're coming from. And you guys are all joining us today. The next one we have is probably more important than what city you're in, is what flavor of pizza is your go-to? What flavor of pizza is your go-to? I know that my favorite changes depending on the store that I'm in or the pizza shop that I'm in. Like, oh, what do they have? And it's usually, if it's sitting in front of me, I like that one. Like, oh, all right, can I get that slice? What do we have for some results? Ooh, pepperoni looks like it's pretty popular. Look at all the flavors. There's any flavors that you wouldn't eat? Ooh, anything with hot honey. How cool is that?
Yeah.
Man, there's lots of choices there. Lucas, you seen anything that you love there?
I'm in with the hot honey. I do love myself a hot honey pizza, maybe with some spicy pepperoni.
That's really good. I'm glad to see we got some things in common with everybody on here. Lots of pizza lovers here. That's awesome. All right, we got one last question to get going on. People are adding more and more choices. Hopefully you've had lunch already. If not, you're going to want pizza for today. This last question that we got for you is, which type of process maps have you used? And so we created a list of a bunch of them here and try to understand who's used them. We've got a basic process map, high-level process map, top-down, detailed process map, a decision process map, swim lanes, and relationships. Oh, this is great. We've got a lot of people that are using most of them. All right, so we've got some experienced people on the call. It's great to see that a lot of people have used the basic process maps. Awesome. Well, hopefully if you haven't used one of these, you'll be able to ask questions about them, and we'll try to share some information about most of these. We're going to really stick with the basic process map because we want to make sure everybody gets that fundamental piece. but we have plenty of time in this session today to answer your questions on the experiences that we have that might have used some of these. So if you're having some of these and you're like, oh, how do you use those? And what's the purpose of those? Please ask those questions as we're going. But as we can stop right now, is there anybody who has a question on any of the maps or the process maps that we've talked about that Lucas can answer? All right.
They know.
Go ahead. Moving on, we're going to jump into some history.
All right, great. So as you can see here, we have some history on flow process charting, right? And originally by Frank Gilbert. I think what's kind of important as you read, there's some important points, right? This process flow has been in place for over 100 years, right? It's not new, but it's changed over time. It's adapted. You can see there's various types of process flow charts and other pieces. But I think what's important, it's still effective today. That's why we're continuing to use it, right? It found some of its rooting right here in New York State at Lake Placid, where it was shifted from the industrial engineering to the business environment. And then lastly, right, at the end of the day, everything can be broken down to a process. Every problem we have, everything we do in life, everything we do in work, it takes steps to get there. Those steps, they build a process. We have the ability to chart that process out. And there's really some great benefits that we're going to talk about here shortly.
One of the things that happened is Lucas and I got together on this and tried to brainstorm what we really wanted to present. And we were both kind of hungry and determined that it had to be about pizza. So we wanted to make sure that you understand we're going to focus today on that food because I think it has a lot of understanding about how you are going to make pizza. When we think about the basic parts of it, they're the same, whether you live in Rochester or Minnesota, Bolivar, right? Their pizza's pretty well known around the world. And as you're looking at those different ways, we could fix or create many different kinds of process maps, but we're going to stick today on the basic process map. So when you think about how a pizza is made, what comes to mind, right? Do you make it in your own kitchen? Is it something that you go out and buy with friends? You go to your favorite pizza stops? Good things in the city, or there are things that you like to go out for a long drive to go to that perfect spot? I know that I've gotten a spot here in Rochester that I go to that I'm like, oh, and I know where it is already on the shelf because it's sitting there when I walk in. I'm like, oh, I'll take that one and that one. And so it tends to be pretty good. But every now and then they'll come up with a special. But even when they have the special, go ahead.
Or thin crust?
Oh,
what about deep dish, thin crust, or Detroit style?
There's probably a lot more, right? And as you're looking at pizza, we can use that as an example on how to start making a process map. The process, if you think about it, is fairly similar. And the more consistent they are, you know that you as a customer, or whether you make it at your house, is going to be very consistent every time. And that's where you get that quality you love and expect, right? If you got a pizza that was cooked differently, like maybe raw one time, overcooked and burnt one time, you might not be a satisfied customer. So how do they get that same quality every time? They're going to have a standard process. How do they get that standard process? It all starts with a process map. When we're talking about pizza, let's think about how it starts, right? You're going to have like a preparation stage. You're going to go, well, here in Rochester, right? Everybody starts at Wegmans. You want to go get your dough, sauce, cheese, any other toppings that you want to have on there. And we had a good list already. I almost want to get some, maybe some pepperoni and honey just for tonight for dinner. It'll be pretty good. Lucas, what do you think some other steps in a process map for making pizzas?
Well, I think, after you have the ingredients, the next step is you got to prep that dough. Are you getting it from scratch? So you're going to have to mix the ingredients. You're going to have to roll it out. You're going to have to let it rise, or you're buying a pre-made dough.
Wait, don't you just throw it in the air? All right.
I'm going to let you do that, Jason. I'll wear it if I do.
It always lands on the floor. I can't get it right. And even after you got the dough done, what happens next, right? You start to assemble the pizza. You're going to have that white sauce, red sauce. Maybe you have a different kind of sauce. You're going to actually, I think a lot of pizzas have cheese on them, but there's so many varieties of cheese, right? Some people have where they have, think of dairy-free cheese. People might have a different flavor from a country they're from, or they visited once and have that. Once you've got all the toppings on there, and it does seem like when I'm with friends, the number of toppings increases. Do you guys notice that? If it's just for me, yeah, cheese and pepperoni, but when I have a lot of people, then the number of toppings goes, I think it's proportional. I don't know if that happens to you guys.
Well, now that the toppings are on, do we just jump right into eating it, Jason?
No. Can't have that. I'm gonna
All
want
right,
to
so
cook a
I guess,
little.
huh?
I'm
So
gonna
the
want to
next
cook a
stage
little.
would be cook that pizza. You gotta, prep the oven, get it up to temperature, make sure that we have the time right so we don't burn it or undercook it as you stated. So let's say we're baking that pizza.
How long does that
What's the
take?
next? Is it
I'm
thin
hungry
crust?
now.
12 minutes, 16 minutes? Thick crust, maybe a little longer?
It's gonna change on
But now
every.
that we baked pizza, what's the next step, Jason?
I think the last thing you want to make sure is you're finishing, right? You want to be able to get that pizza out of the oven. You're going to be able to share it with some people. In order to do that, you can't just eat one slice. So you're probably going to have to cut it somehow. And then you're going to serve it, whether that's in a box because somebody's taking it to go, or if you've got plates to put it on, right? Those are kind of the big process steps when I think of a pizza. And I think the good part about this is that if you think about it, could it just fit on a napkin? I mean, how many people have been out somewhere where they got a napkin and you're like, oh, I'll just write my process map out there. That's how simple pizza is. I think that works well. And so Lucas and I just kind of walk through the basic steps of making a pizza. And I think that you'll agree, most places that make pizzas, whether you're at home or in a restaurant, will be the same. So we talked about a preparation, we talked about making the dough, assembling everything, cooking it, and then somehow finishing it up so that you can give it to everybody so they can enjoy it. That's really the high level steps of making a pizza. But you might be asking yourself, why would you even want to make a process map, right? When you look at some of the basic pieces, standardization, right? We know that that's the hallmark of quality. Once you have a standard product and a process, you know that you can make improvements on it and you'll have customers that keep reaching for that. Whether that's at a restaurant and your business continues to grow, or you're at home and people can kind of come over and visit and ask you saying, hey, can I get that pizza again? Good things.
Efficiency, right? As we look at the process and map it out, we can identify, different areas that have bottlenecks or gaps or other issues in the process, and we can make that process more efficient, right? When I think about a pizza, I know that my oven is only so large, so I can only cook pizzas that are so big and so many at a time. I know that is a bottleneck that I have if I'm cooking for a large group of people.
I think training is another way that can make it more efficient and faster. If it's in my house, man, I got two teenage daughters. I want them to learn how to make pizza mostly so they can make it for me. And I want it to be a high quality pizza so I enjoy it a lot. If I were going to the same pizza store, I would definitely want them to have the same quality and make sure that they're going to have turnover in employees. How do they make it so that it's successful for them? Just by training in a standard process map.
Well, as you just said, quality control, right? So having a set process in place that you follow every time makes it a lot easier to maintain and measure quality, right? We can make sure that we're cooking at the same temperature every time, the same amount of time every time. Everyone knows what it takes to make that pizza. And we make it the same way every time, so hopefully the quality remains the same.
If you do have that same standard every time, then you can easily troubleshoot things that go wrong. You can also look at how much resources you might need to make that pizza. Does it take 2 people, 4 people, 8 people? And also looking at communication. How fast can you communicate this process to other people and making sure that they understand the workflow so they can pass it between each other?
I think a nice part about the communication and increased communication with the process, knowing that process, having it mapped out, is really, it enables faster decision making, right? How fast can we make a decision, right? If we need to make a change in the process, we know the plan, we can communicate more effectively, and we can change it, we can make those decisions faster.
Those are a lot of reasons why you would want to make a process map. Let's talk about where to start.
Well, I think, Jason, to start, right, we have to identify what that process or problem is that we want to map out.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out if I can remove that red line. I don't know if you guys can see it. Like,
Yes.
Somebody put that there. There we go. All right. When you look at every step that might be in a process map, it has that flow that you can see on there. For every step, you're going to look at inputs and outputs. So for example, if we talked about some of the things that we mentioned earlier about making pizza, when you're thinking about the ingredients and you're preparing those, do you go get them as an input from Wegmans? As an output, do you give it to the next person in line that might be adding the sauce, right? So those things that can be helpful to have that. And this is a simple example. One of the things that can make it be more impactful is if you have a feedback loop. Notice that bottom line. One of the things that I've had the opportunity to do is hold different types of events or trying to figure out what's wrong with a process. The pictures that you can see there are two different ones, and they're larger processes. So as you're looking at them, you can see that a team is working on that. And that's what I recommend when you're launching into trying to figure out how do you fix some process, and you're like, hey, let's start with a process map. Awesome. This isn't something that you do all by yourself. You really want to evaluate all the people or stakeholders or inputs and outputs into a process that are involved with it. So that way you can start to put this up and have a current state. The idea is that you're going to say, hey, how does the process work today? If it is making pizza, right? You could actually go in to your kitchen or maybe a pizza shop and watch. And so we call that like going to the Gemba. Where's that process? And you're going to watch what happens and document it. When you're done, you may get in a conference room like these pictures suggest, where you're able to map it out. Some of the things that can happen in either one of these, I like to use some colors. And so one of the tips that I use is I'll use blue or orange going across for the process. And then I like to use red and green. Red for pain points and green for things that the team may have generated as like an idea for a solution. Like, oh, well, this really isn't working well for us, but I got an idea. And sometimes that can be a great tool that helps other people generate ideas too. So capturing them, if you look at the pictures, you can kind of see where some pain points are in the process. If it were pizza, right, the pain point might be it takes too long to cook. Okay, how can you speed that up? Can you turn the temperature up? Can you really satisfy the customer in cooking it less? Really good things to look at that, and where to start is really making sure you understand those inputs and outputs. I saw on the chat somebody suggested SIPOC. Lucas, are you familiar with the SIPOC tool? What it means?
I mean, you pretty much spell it out there in your little white box, right? You get your input suppliers. You're going to do a high-level process, 4 to 5 steps, right? What are the main functions of that process? And then that's going to give you your outputs and your customers and your outputs, right? So we're going to know who's going to give us what and what's going to who. And that's going to be throughout that process, right? We might have various customers, internal and external. We might have various suppliers, both internal and external.
I think that's really good. I often start with a SIPOC when I'm doing a process map or getting to that kind of event, because I can know, if I know all the inputs and outputs, I've talked to the stakeholders that are involved in this process, I know that those are the people that I need on the team.
I think, Jason, it's kind of like these pictures. Before you say it, let me comment, right? These pictures below show that it doesn't take special tooling. It doesn't take any magic, training or education to walk through a process map, right? It's identifying that process, getting the right people in the room, and it's letting them do the work. Let them decide what activities are happening in that process. Let them help you sequence when those activities start and end and what's the next step, right? And at the end of the day, once they've done that for you, you put it in a nice little pretty sheet and you let them analyze it for improvements, right? At the end of the day, they're doing the work. You're just helping them facilitate.
I love when that happens. That's great. Especially if you can get things started and they can help you get the details to be able to populate some process map. You'll all be on the same page. And that's really important. When you take the time and the effort to be able to create this change, you're going to recognize that the change is a lot easier because of everybody that was involved in the front. And a simple SIPOC tool will help you make sure you got that successful. So those are good places to start. Here's a few examples that we have. Lucas, you want to start with the top left?
Sure, we're looking at a high-level process map, right? And this kind of can flow into that SIPOC. It's really a piece of it. If you look down at that lower right corner of your SIPOC, you can see there's 5 stages. Those could be those 5 stages you see in that business process there, right? So where do we start? Where do we end? And a few things in between.
When we look at the
What about
bottom,
you, Jim?
yep, the bottom left one, we see is a flow chart. Notice that it can actually help you by making some decisions or reflecting what decisions need to be made. Is it a simple yes or no, or is it red or green, right? Some of those could be based on demand, like customer demand, or what the process is based on the previous step. Looking at the top right, you can see there's a different kind of style. Let's put that in the chat. You guys know what the top right one is? What do you think the top right process map is? Have you seen that before?
Well, while people are entering that, I just want to confirm, Jason, you did order the pizzas, right?
Not yet.
Was it a
I thought we were making it together.
On the call? Is that what you said you were getting for everyone? No?
It's not a lunch and learn. It's just a session today where we're doing process mapping. I am seeing a lot of swim lanes on there, right? Definitely. Swim lane has some characteristics that really become visible when you're looking at it and how to be successful. If you can see my pointer, I'm talking or showing you guys the top row. That's usually like a function. So in our pizza example, it could be somebody here who is taking the order, right? That could be a customer service type person working on the front counter. As you go down another row, you might see that that's a person that is assembling the pizzas. The middle there, that could be somebody that's baking the pizzas. And then the last one could be the actual pizza delivery person if you were going there. And the same thing if it's in your kitchen. You might have different roles depending on, hey, I'm the dad and I don't want to do the sauce part. Great. Or I get banned from putting the cheese on the pizza. I don't know if that happens to you guys. For some reason, when we have this much cheese, by the time I've got it on there, there's only this much. Something happens to it. I've also got 2 black labs that for some reason stand right in line when I'm putting cheese on a pizza. So those things happen. And then the next type here you can see. What do you think this kind of process map is called? Let's go ahead and put that in the chat also. What kind of process map is this one? Right in the middle. It's a little more busy. It's got some icons on there too. So I think this one's probably less known, right? We don't see it used a lot. I think mostly I tend to see it in manufacturing spaces where they're doing maybe higher volume. And so they'll take the time and some of the pieces of data are known. This is a value stream map. And so there are certain characteristics of a value stream map that will make sure that when you see one, you'll know it. And so you can't really read it well here, but in the top right is what the customer demand is. And so they've got this shape like a factory. In the top left, you'll see a vendor or a supplier, and it would be like a critical one. In this case, we could easily say that the food delivery truck, if they come every Thursday, oh yeah, that's what it is. When we look at the bottom would be all the process steps that we talked about how to make a pizza. Remember when we said there was things like finishing at the end and assembling in the middle and then preparing for all the ingredients. So those things can be in there. The advantage of a value stream map is that there's a lot more information on it. There is information flows at the top, which is telling you how do you know to make things. There are things where you can see these arrows that are here for pushing, and there's also triangles for inventory. Sometimes you might hear that as WIP. And then we have some characteristics below them for each process step. How long does it take? What's the yield? How many steps does it take? Whatever is pertinent to there, you can see that. And then there's also a ladder below them, really identifying value-added and non-value-added steps. So they get to do some calculations that can help you see where your current state of your process is and then where you may want to take it to. So a value stream map is pretty powerful, and it takes a lot of information, and we'll talk about some of the other icons in another slide. Any questions on any of the examples here? You can come off and mute if you want, or you can type something in the chat. I just want to give it a minute for you guys to ask questions about the different types in case you haven't seen them before.
How would you make a decision about which one to use?
What do you think, Lucas? You just eeny, meeny, miny, mo?
I think it depends on your level of knowledge of them, right? So I know that, for instance, for me, right, we talked about SIPOC, a high level, in a swim lane. Those are probably the 3 that I lean on the most, right? And it depends on the situation. If I'm just trying to understand quickly what we do, I might just jump on a high level and I say, okay, this is what we do, and then I can easily share that. But if we want to understand who does what and when they do it in the process, I jump to a swim lane. So I can see this person does this, or this function does this at this time, and then they hand off to this, and then you see that whole walk through that process. And so most of the time when you start that swim lane with a process that's never been mapped before, you start to see a spaghetti diagram of, you know, things that's going all over that map, and it really outlines some of those challenges and issues in that process. So I think for me, swim lane is often one of the ones I like to go to. I'd say that value stream map is probably one I stay away from.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. And Terry, a good question you had there. The way that I look at it is I always start with a high level process map because I need people to focus on where we're talking about. If you are doing a process map and you're going to talk to other people about it, they need to understand where you're talking about it. If you grab a process map and it has 30 steps, they may be lost. Like, oh, where are you talking about? Or they may only understand their portion of it. So that's why we generate them together and try to do the current state. Even if I'm doing a value stream map, I'll start with a SIPOC. I will also start with a high level process map. So what you can end up seeing, just like Lucas said, is you kind of walk yourself into that and keep going until you can clearly see where the problems are. And you can also annotate some method on where improvements might be. When we look at the business process one up here, this example, I find it very easy to put another red box, the same size there. So imagine that we had a problem with approve requests. They're taking too long. I might put a red box there or a Kaizen burst, like it's a star shape, and just put it on there and say, hey, we're going to approve the approve request process step. We want to decrease that. Today it takes 28 days. We want to get it down to 21 days. That's our process that we're going to do. And it's very visible there if it were a big red box, right? So good pieces there. Good question. I see another question.
So this one for you. What are some applications of VSM outside of manufacturing?
So the idea of transactional things or back office operations, could you use a VSM? You sure can. One of the things, I'll give you an application. If you're in a business and you do monthly financial closures, right? You're trying to close the books. Could you make a VSM about that? You sure can. There are pieces here where you're like, oh, who's the customer? In this case, the customer might be corporate. The customer might be the CFO. The customer might be an investor, right? Those types of roles that say, hey, I want the financial close process. Instead of it being done in 10 days, I want it done in 7 days. Oh, well, let's map that out. Let's see each step of the process. Let's capture some data about that. And so some of the pieces that might be slightly different, instead of WIP, you might use a different icon for emails, your inbox. And so I know there's a standard one for that. And so you might say, well, how many emails do you get for this financial closure? Oh, I get 150 emails. Oh, okay, great. How long does it take you to process them? Perfect. Oftentimes when you see a process that's longer and people at the end are going, hey, why does it take you so long? I work in a company now that's a defense contractor, and they will often say, in fact, I heard an example today where somebody was like, oh, it should only take you 2 or 3 days to get that approval. What takes so long? And they're like, you know that it's 60 to 90 days when you go to the government agency, right? And their response and turnaround time. Why would you think it's going to be 2 or 3 days? They're like, yes, my work is only a couple of hours and it wouldn't take that long, but the next person. And so what you end up seeing is by using a value stream map, you really map it out there and you can see that. You can also understand where the pain points in that process are and what we consider maybe putting Kaizen bursts on there. So that's an example where you might want to be able to do that for a transactional. And I'm just using a finance monthly closure tip process that can help there. Does that answer the question? I know it was on text or on the chat. Perfect.
So there was another one about which type is specifically useful in service organizations. And I think, Jason, you shared right there, right? You can start with a high-level process map, which might be the easiest and most minimal one, all the way to a VSM, even within a service organization. It depends on your comfort level. Do you have the right people in the room? And then how deep can you really dive into that process? As you said, Jason, earlier, you grow, right? Let's start with that high level. People start to understand, then you can start breaking that down into the values, into like a swim lane, and then even into a value stream map.
I feel like there's a healthy balance there to make sure that you don't go too deep. If you, for example, have a PhD that's making the dough for you in a pizza, and they're really critical about the temperature and the number of enzymes that are in that dough, that's probably not the level that you're going to operate the entire process at. So some of that can really be helpful on who's in the team and what information they have to share. You'll end up seeing that more mature processes probably have more mature process mapping. So getting started always with a high level process map. Keep it simple, and that's where I recommend on the back of a napkin, right? What I wanted to let
So
you
they,
know. Okay.
Sorry, Jason. Dick just asked a good question, right? So have you found that when you get a large team together to create a map, people learn what is going on in other areas of the organization? And absolutely, definitely, Dick. So I can give an example that I've had where there was only about 10 people, but the process was very convoluted. It included government agencies, it included our company all the way through, and it was how to get a single product that went into a single piece that went into one of our products. Well, by the time we finished walking through the map, everyone was going, wait, you have to do that? Wait, it takes so long to do this? And everyone learned from that, just that exercise, the challenges that other areas had. And then we were able to more easily focus on the problem as a team, rather than saying you take too long, or you're doing it wrong, and understand why people are doing it the way they are, or functions are doing it the way they are. So absolutely, Dick, there's a lot of learning that goes on just from developing that process map.
I think a lot of things can happen if you start to see if things can be done in parallel or in series, right? Sometimes you're like, well, why are we waiting until step 3 happens before we do step 4? Oh, once you make it visual, you'll be able to see that. And just like Lucas said, the whole team gets to see that. Oh, I didn't know that. It's great when the lights turn on and you illuminate the process. And the easiest way to do that is with a process map. Moving on, this slide is really to help you understand there are software applications. So one of them is popular is Visio. You can make a high-level process map in. You can also make them in PowerPoint. You can make them in Word. There are a lot of different icons that might be used. Here's some of the top ones. Whether you're using something like Visio, which is popular for it, or you're using something like PowerPoint, the important thing is you can use the tools you have. Please don't go buy another tool just to try and make a process map. If you're really comfortable in using paint, use that. If you're comfortable with paper and pencil, use that. Those will definitely be helpful. And all it has to do is make sure the other team members can understand it. Some of the shapes might be helpful if you're doing some more complex processes, or you want to be very specific on what you're doing and trying to tackle. The symbols that you can see here on the basic flowcharts are things where each process step could be a blue box, and you could change the colors too, just on your settings. Notice that it has a decision or sub-process, right? Oh, there's inputs into something and trying to help that. Even a start and stop, right? It really helps the team focus on what part of the process we're focused on. And those people or things can be highlighted in the SIPOC also that we talked about. When you look at the one on the value stream maps, again, a lot of different options here, but it really does tell the story of how the process works. It can also tell the story of what potential improvements are coming that you might want to improve on. And also, sometimes we have a misunderstanding of how the process works. For example, there are symbols there that could help you understand if somebody gets an email to be able to execute that process step. Or are they getting information from an ERP like Oracle or SAP that's telling them when the demand signal is coming in? Or do they have a manager or supervisor on the floor that tells them, hey, make 3 of these today, would you please? Okay, and so those types of things really help people understand how the process is working. And it's not to hide that or to really make sure that people don't understand it. The idea is to make it visible. And if you do recognize that as a challenge, then you can make those improvements.
All right, just a couple more comments. So a couple more questions, comments. So Darlene points out, right, they started at a high level and then they worked their way down a level or two. But I think a great point is you don't want to get to so far down into the weeds that you're writing and then I pick up a pen, right? And that's a quote from Darlene. Absolutely, right. So we have work instructions. That's how to facilitate these steps. But really what we want to document is what are the steps, right? And understanding what level we want to get to is a great thing to understand. Jeff here talks about, right, not only improving processes, but also, right, building relationships. Absolutely. We all learn together. We all grow together. carry with a start and end point, right? You got to start somewhere and you got to end somewhere, and you need to understand where those pieces are. Writing down the assumptions for those starts and stops is important too. All right, Jason.
Awesome questions in the chat. Keep them coming in. I love it when you provide a challenge for Lucas. See if he can keep up with all of them. So let's walk through an example together so that you guys have seen what a process map looks like, and then we'll just stick with pizza. Does anybody remember what the last step is? And the reason why we start in a process map with the last step is that's the closest step and process to the customer. And if we focus on that and go backwards, I find that that's the most successful way for making that. Plus, if you think about it, and a team member, if you're part of that team, you really have to think like, oh, what's the one before that? So you're really getting the team engaged. If they're all concentrating on what's before that, it's a little easier than, hey, I do this process 50 times a day. I know this inside and out. Now try to do it backwards. Well, think about it for yourself. How many of you can repeat the alphabet? A, B, C. Okay, do it backwards. Now I just got you all to concentrate really hard, right? Z, Y. It really does help that level of engagement there. So here, can we have some people put some answers maybe in chat or come off from mute? What's the last step that happens in the process of making pizza? I love the uncooked.
I like this. Uncook the pizza. That's a good one. We're going to uncook it, and we're going to do that by eating it and maybe serving it before that.
Serve. Yep. All right. Great. So when we think about it, keep going, Lucas. You got it.
We're gonna finish that pizza, right? So the first thing, to get in the customer's hand, which the customer will then eat and clean up and all those fun things, but we need to finish that pizza. So we need to make sure it's cut, make sure it's in the box, and delivered hot and fresh.
So what happens before that, Lucas?
Right. We eat it, right? Don't we eat it before we finish it?
Good, we're getting some teamwork here. You want to make sure you bake it well, right? Those good things happen. And the same thing, if you're the one facilitating this event and you're trying to build a process map, asking those things. Okay, what happens before baking? Right? Does anybody remember the process step before that? I love the feed the dog cheese. Yes, sharing. Right, and we talked about that in the assembly phase, right? Making sure that we understand that. And if we keep going back, hey, what happens before that? You would get the team really good to go, oh yeah, dough. And then preparation, right? Getting all those ingredients together. So this is a high-level process map. We've just walked through it together for pizza. This is all it needs to be, right? There isn't anything complicated. We're using a PowerPoint software here. You can use sticky notes really quick across a board, a whiteboard on a piece of paper. So it is not about the tools so much as the effort and the team that you have involved in that. Any questions on this example of a high-level process map? Okay. So if you know how to do one, let's talk about what could go wrong. Lucas, have process maps ever gone wrong for you?
No, Jason, never.
Never.
Why did they go wrong? What are you doing wrong? Are you not ensuring you have the appropriate stakeholders?
Well, if I could just get everybody to understand what we're talking about first, right? Those clear objectives are such a challenge, right? One of the things that I try to do is get this documented beforehand. A document that I like to use is a project charter, and it's probably 1 page in PowerPoint. That's it. It's not a complicated document. If I can put on there what the problem is and what part of the process we are talking about, the whole team will know that. What you don't want is a high-level process map where if I were to do it, we're going to talk about A, B, C, and D. If Lucas does it, he's on D, E, and F, and G, and somebody else is on X, Y, and Z. You're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. By documenting what the problems are, and what your clear objectives, what your goals are, can be really helpful for the team. I think of some other things that can go wrong is, somebody mentioned it there, picking the pen up and putting it on the paper, right? Over documenting it. When we talk about a high-level process map, keep it there, right? That's probably at the 10,000-foot level. If you need more detail, you might start to do another type of process map, maybe a swim lane. If you need a lot more details and you're down to the 10-foot marker, it might be a value stream map. You can also use some other variations in there that we talked about, like a top-down one. There are many different ways to make it. What you really want to do is make sure the team understands it. So don't get too complicated for the team.
I think another one, you talk about variations, not including the variations in your process, right? Those variations can capture feedback loops and other areas that may not be caught if we don't talk about those variations or exceptions in the process. So we need to capture those, at least at some level, to understand that and build those feedback loops.
I think another piece that can go wrong is that if you use the same process map for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and you never update it, even though you're making improvements. Keep the high-level process map or any other versions of a process map updated as you're going so that you really understand what your current state is and you're able to visually show what some improvements are.
And I think ultimately, Jason, not utilizing a process map for what it is, right? Increasing communication. If you're using poor communication, or if you're not, sharing or validating that process map, it's not gonna work for anyone. It's just gonna be a piece of paper with color on it.
Pretty paper. Nice. Well, those are the pieces that we wanted to share with you today and really just try to highlight a process map. You got to see some examples. You got to see how to start. We've talked about some of the pieces that can go wrong, right? And really give you some examples of, you should be able to identify what some process maps are or the different variations there are. So if you see a high-level process map, oh yeah, or a flow chart. Okay, that's one where I see decisions. When we talked about some of the other ones that might be a value stream map, those are ones with a lot of data on it that may not be the right tool for you. So as you talk about getting the right tool usage, is making sure that one that fits for you and the team and the process you're trying to do that.
Yeah, Jason Welch points out, right, trying to fix that problem while developing your current state, right? So you can't fix the problem while you're making your current state process map. You need to make your current state process map on what we do, and then you can make your future state with improvements.
Give you an example. Sometimes I've seen people who will create a process map based on the standard documentation that they have. They're like, well, I've got the formal policy and it says this is how it's supposed to work. Well, that policy could have been written 2 years ago. And has the policy or the process evolved today? Hopefully, you may not be sure, but hopefully when you do that, you get the current state. What is it actually happening today? That's a good way to make sure that you don't get lost in the organization. Because if you start talking to team members about, well, this is what the process says we're supposed to do, and this is what we're actually doing. If you start to document what we're doing and it's not currently happening, then you don't have the current state. Any changes that you make may not be impactful and they may actually do harm. So it's really important to have that current state of what it is. So when you're creating a process map, please, please, please don't use a process standard work, right? Don't, a lot of times we'll just say, go see it, go see what's happening. And that may sound funny if you're talking about a transactional process. When you stand behind somebody and they're in their cube or they're in their office doing a process and you're like, can I stand behind you while you do that email? It is necessary because that way you'll understand exactly how it happens. Okay.
Yeah, so Jason, Amber just brought up a good one, right? So what advice do you have for teams looking to move from process mapping to process improvement and implementation? Chris actually absolutely walking the process to develop that process map is great, but also walking through that and highlighting issues and where they fall in that process map is one thing that I like, right? So if you get everyone in a room and you're throwing up Post-it notes on a whiteboard or on the wall, and here's all my major steps, and one of them has 32 red sticky notes on it, well, you have a lot of problems in that step. And then you're going to want to take some more time and break down that high level step to all its different pieces so you can understand where those problems are really coming from.
Yeah, I'd recommend as soon as you've identified those, go ahead and put them on an Excel spreadsheet. Simply track all of those issues, track them to closure. Can you make improvements on those? If there are things that will make it better and you need to talk to IT, awesome. If there are things that will make it better and you need to change, like, for example, I'm just making it up, but you need to change the style of box you have. Oh, if we just use that box, it would be better and faster. Perfect, right? Or a different kind of tape. One of the things that I've seen is in a manufacturing process where instead of a human putting glue on, they have it automatically dispensed by a robot. Like, oh, that changed the process quite a bit. That made it better. And they did that from a process map where they were able to say, hey, this is really taking us, 4 minutes to do it. A robot can do it in half that time. Wow, let's do that. So you can see those kind of improvements. And the same thing can happen with a transaction based, where you can start to see, hey, we take it to one person and they do items 2, 3, and 4. We take it to the next person and they do items 5 and 6 and 7. Can't we just have the first person do 2 through 7? Wait for it, think about it, check on it. Yeah, we could do that. Oh, perfect, right? So those things can happen. Think of, an example that I'm trying to think of is we have one person who does it. When they're on vacation, the process doesn't happen. You might easily figure out, hey, what if we just had it go into a general email box where everybody could have visibility to it so that when they're out, we can have coverage. Oh, yeah. And that way, what you end up seeing, the process time doesn't get delayed because of vacation, illnesses, or even in Rochester, bad weather. Who knew? There's snow days sometimes.
Hey, Jason, Terry has a question for you. He says, which type of process map would you use to help an organization drive revenue growth or market share or customer base?
All of them. I don't think you can go wrong with it. Terry, when you look at a big business, you need to get everybody on the same page. That'll be definitely with a high-level process map. And when you're talking to executive leaders at the top level, keeping it simple works well. Hey, this is the area that we're going to focus on. Great. If there are additional details, they may be interested in looking at a swim lane. They may want to dig in more. That's probably when they're going to be on the floor talking to you. Maybe that's when you have a value stream map. Those things can help you drive revenue, because when you end up seeing things like a high-level process map or a value stream map or even a swim lane, you may tie them to KPIs, right? Those key performance indicators. You may say revenue, we want it to grow next month. How are we going to do that? We're going to do that by shipping 500 more products. How are we going to do that? Oh, we're going to do that by automating the glue, right? Just give me an example there. All that can be tied to revenue. When you get to a point where you're comfortable doing high-level process maps and process maps in general, you'll start to be better at them, and you may tie them to some metrics. A lot of times you're trying to make people's pain points go away, but some of those things can result on a faster cycle time. Give you an example of the finance closure, right? How do we make that faster from 10 days down to 7? That may be a great goal. It's funny when you look at it, the goal is, how do we make it easier for people, not get people doing more work? And so easier for the people to do that so that it can be done in 7 days. And when you're done with that, you've saved an awful lot of labor. And that really can do, as Terry was suggesting, impact your revenue. And so you're like, oh, those are great things.
The next question, thanks, Jason. The next question from Amber. I think you kind of touched on some of these, right? So how do you handle resistance from leadership or teams who may see process mapping as unnecessary or disruptive? I mean, I think we're coming down to change management, and how do we change people's opinions of something? And you talked through a couple of those, right? Driving it to KPIs, right? So, hey, through this process map, I believe we can impact this KPI, which is important to you. Inviting them to the session so they can learn what people are doing and how they're doing. What other things? How else do you do it, Jason?
Oh, definitely with an iron fist, just like a parent would. You do it or else. That's probably not going to be effective, right? As much as it may be frustrating and we want to try and force people to do that, one of the things that I can find helpful is to make sure before they step into the room about process mapping and you're going to complete that exercise, find some training. It could be a 4-minute YouTube video, just some general understanding of what a process map is so that they understand the purpose and the outcomes of that. I know that in my company, we have some standard training. I will give that training before that session. I'll be like, hey, in the first 5 minutes, we're just going to review the PowerPoint slides so that everybody understands what the tool is and how to use it. That can really reduce some of the, I'll say, the frustration people might have of not wanting to do that tool.
The last question I see, how do you decide who the best facilitator is for the experience? And then when might you bring in an external facilitator? I think one way to decide who might want to do it is the first person that says we should do a process map. Maybe they're the ones that should facilitate this. But I think that ultimately anyone can do it that has a desire to, that has the ability to ask the questions and help facilitate and help people walk through their process. So often I find myself just asking, and then, what's the next step, right? And then after we figure out all the steps, and well, where do you have, what's your problem? This is a problem. Okay, where does it go in this flow? So I think ultimately from the basic standpoint, anyone could facilitate it. I think as we move into much more complex, deeper, right, we're moving into VSMs and other things, we might need some help. Jason, what do you think?
I would actually agree with that. I feel like some of the times where I've had those questions comes up, like who should facilitate? And what I'll ask is a simple question: where are you on your journey? And what I want to know is, have you facilitated a process map before? If you're comfortable doing that, I want you to do it again. If you're not, your team doesn't have that experience. If you're a leader and you're trying to say, hey, I think we need to do a process map, we need to get there, but nobody's ever done one, that's when you probably consider going external. The idea that I try to do is I go into an organization inside my company or another one, and they don't know how to do a process map. I want to get them to that point where they can. Once they can, all right. And it's almost like that train the trainer method. If I can go into an organization and leave them with that capability, they are going to be much stronger to be able to do it continuously without my help. So I'm always looking for those opportunities. So to answer that question, if there's no capability for that tool, then go ahead and get an external person. And it might not be externally your company. It could be reaching out to GRQC. Hey, we're trying to do a process map. We've never done it. Do you guys have any resources? Oh, okay, great. Good ways to look at it.
I think that's a great shameless plug. You have some great resources here to help you on your journey for process mapping. Day of Quality is just one of those potential ways. And we heard so much passion from Jason and Lucas today in terms of process mapping and all of the benefits and some tips and tricks for doing it yourself. Jason and Lucas, any closing thoughts before we move to close out?
And a great audience. Thanks for sharing your questions with us, and good luck on your journey doing process maps.
Well, thank you so much.
I think ultimately it goes back to, you are empowered to be a process mapping superhero. I have faith that we can all do one now.
We're all wearing capes together. So with that call to action, we encourage you, please sign up to be a volunteer for Day of Quality and help others find that same passion for process mapping, or sign up your organization for Day of Quality and see how you might get some outside fresh perspectives or fresh facilitators to look from the outside in on your process and how we might be able to support you. Great opportunities there. If you're not, oh, go ahead, Jason.
Amber, yeah, just one other point on the data quality piece. Definitely, if you're experienced and want to facilitate, we'd love to have you involved. But also for those that are dipping your toes in it and want to experience what facilitating an exercise with an organization to help an organization is all about, we have those roles for folks as well. So don't think that you need to be the leader, facilitator, expert. If you have some experience, some background, some interest and a desire to help, we want you involved. So please reach out to us for questions and more information, and take advantage of the information on the website as well. Thanks, Amber.
Awesome. Great call, Jason. Additional ways to get involved with GRQC, we encourage you to join us as an individual or as a member organization. We've got lots of opportunities to volunteer on different subcommittees of GRQC. So maybe you're interested in helping plan the next Performance Excellence Forum, or helping to spread the awareness of performance excellence in our community. We'd love to hear from you. Please reach out and check out our website. Also, if you're interested in supporting a future Performance Excellence Forum, feel free to submit ideas on that survey that we just popped into the chat. Please, please, please take the survey. Give us your feedback. Tell us how hungry you are now that Jason and Lucas talked about pizza for hours, because I know I am. And thank our speakers. Please join us in thanking them, maybe by sharing something in the chat that you learned about process mapping or a commitment that you might make. And coming up soon are more programs. So we've got the New York Smart I-Corridor Tech Hub coming up on February 26th, Managing Stress on March 26th, Leadership Excellence in the U.S. Military on April 14th, and Group Dynamics and Facilitation Techniques on May 28th. And our friends at Penn are holding an event on February 20th on leadership as a conversation. Again, our gratitude to Jason and Lucas as our speakers and to all of you for joining us on your lunch break. We hope you have a great afternoon. Enjoy your pizza and happy process mapping. Thank you.
Hey there.
Thank you.